That skill presents decimal division. To understand division of decimals better, let's quickly review the process of decimal multiplication. To multiply the decimal number 4.5 with the decimal number 0.12, you pretty much multiply the two numbers ignoring the decimal point. So you do 45 multiplied with 12, and that gives you 540. But then 4.5 is nothing but 45 divided with 10. It's the decimal point shifted one place over to the left. And similarly, 0.12 is nothing but 12 divided with 100 because the decimal point has been shifted two places over to the left. And therefore the answer is the product of 45 and 12, which is 540, divided by the product of 10 and 100, which is 1000. Which means we need to shift the decimal point three places over to the left. So this answer is 0.540. And then it's also important to note that the number of digits after the decimal point on the product or the answer to the multiplication is equal to the sum of the number of digits you have on each one of the numbers you're multiplying. So you have one place after the decimal point on this one and two places after the decimal point on this one. So you have three places after the decimal point on this one, the answer. Now let's try and change this multiplication sentence to a division sentence. The product becomes the dividend. So we have 0.540 divided by, pick any of the two factors. Let's go with 0.12 divided by 0.12 is equal to 4.5. And this one's called the dividend. This one's called the divisor. And this one is the quotient or the answer to the division problem. Now there are three places after the decimal point on the dividend and two places after the decimal point on the divisor, and 3 minus 2, that is only one place after the decimal point on the quotient. And that's pretty obvious because in multiplication we were doing 1 plus 2 is equal to 3 places or 3 digits after the decimal point. Now when we change that to a division, we got to do 3 minus 2 is equal to 1. So if a divisor has got no digit after the decimal point, meaning it's an integer divisor, so the number of digits after the decimal point becomes 0 on this, and then whatever the number of digits after the decimal point on the dividend is the same number of digits after the decimal point on the quotient. Anything minus 0 is equal to that same number. And we just make use of all of this that we discussed about the positioning of the decimal point by changing the divisor to an integer number so that there's no digit after the decimal point on the divisor, so that the dividend and the quotient have their decimal point at the same places. So in the context of this example, what I mean is, if we were to change the 0.12 to an integer, meaning move the decimal point two places over to the right, that is times that with 100. And to keep the same problem, you need to do the same with the dividend. Move the decimal point two places over to the right on the dividend as well. So multiply the dividend with 100 as well. And so the problem becomes the same as 54 divided with 12. So if we do this division now, 54 divided with 12, let's keep in mind that the decimal point on 54 is right in the end. So it's actually a 54.0 or a 00, any number of zeros after the decimal point. Now 12 times 4 is 48. We have a 48 down here. Subtract. Just go ahead with normal division. We have a 6 here. And then because there's a decimal point here, you want to put a decimal point right above it on the quotient. And that was the whole idea of changing the divisor to an integer by multiplying that with 100, moving the decimal point right in the end, which means it would have zero number of digits after the decimal point, so that the decimal point on the dividend is exactly at the same position as the decimal point on the quotient. And remember, decimal divisions should not be having a remainder. So bring down the 0, this becomes a 60, 12 times 5 is 60, subtract, you have a 0 now. So the answer is 4.5. Let's try a word problem. If a set of 9 pencils cost 19.35 Rand, what is the price of one pencil? To find the price of one pencil, obviously we divide the total cost with the number of pencils. So let's go ahead and divide 19.35 with 9. Now because the divisor is already an integer, if it weren't, you would need to change it to an integer by multiplying that with a suitable power of 100 so that the decimal point would move right in the end. And do the same on the dividend. But we don't need anything like that because this is already 9, which is an integer. And that means the decimal point on the quotient, whatever that is going to be right over here. Now let's start with the actual division. 9 times 2 is 18. So you subtract, you get a 1, bring down the 3, this becomes a 13. 9 times 1 is 9, subtract, 13 minus 9 is 4, bring down the 5, 45, and 9 times 5 is 45, so we have no remainder. So the price of one pencil is 2.15 Rand. That's exactly how you solve division problems involving decimal numbers.